And welcome, Hoosier fans, to this week's edition of Assembly Call Radio, where each week we discuss the most urgent topics in the world of Indiana basketball. This is our 154th edition of Assembly Call Radio, and it is our 569th episode overall of the Assembly Call, recorded on the evening of Thursday, January 9th, 2020. Thanks, Jared. I'm your host, Andy Bottoms, and let's begin this edition of the Assembly Call how we begin every edition of the Assembly Call, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment. While last night's game, albeit a win, was largely, if not completely devoid of banner moments, the net result was that the Hoosiers staved off what would have been an unspeakable loss thanks to a lack of focus and effort for the majority of the game. It's probably easy to read too much into what the last 10 minutes of last night's game, plus Archie's post-game comments might even mean, but even so, we may look back on it as a turning point toward hanging a banner one way or another. Ultimately, there are a couple different ways things could go from here. One is that the players don't respond or Archie doesn't follow through and hold them accountable, in which case the season is basically over and likely to spiral out of control. That feels like it'd be pretty hard to recover from on the heels of what we saw a season ago. And at some point as a coach, once you've lost the fan base, you never really get them back. And if that's how things play out, we're likely to start looking for the next coach charged with hanging another banner. So maybe that's a banner moment somewhere down the line. However, if the players do respond and display the same level of toughness and effort that was shown during that Wednesday night comeback, there's enough talent on the roster to get to the NCAA tournament, given the 12 wins that IU's already picked up. They're not going to compete for a Big Ten title. I think it's safe to say that at this point, or get to the Final Four. But Archie has to restore the standard of effort that needs to be given on a game in and game out basis. And quite frankly, it might be too late because I'm still not quite sure how we've reached a point where pride and hustle can't be counted on game to game, particularly after last season. But here we are. And so we've got 10 minutes against Northwestern, and I think it takes even more than following that up with a good performance against Ohio State to convince me that somehow rallying to win a game against the league's worst team at home is truly a turning point in the season or even in Archie's tenure. But if this staff harbors any hopes of hanging another banner, the changes have to start now. Level of effort and focus have to improve now. Players have to respond now. Coaches have to respond now. Follow through and consistent accountability have to start now. Ultimately, time will tell whether the events of Wednesday night mean anything for this coach and this team, but we'll start to find out more on Saturday afternoon. All right, now let me introduce my esteemed co-host for this week's show. Jared is off tonight, probably working diligently to capture all the drops from Coach's latest AC After Dark last night, but he'll be back to host the postgame show after the Ohio State game on Saturday. And if you're curious what his thoughts are after a night to sleep on Indiana's performance against Northwestern, you can read the commentary he posted Thursday morning titled "It's Ultimatum Time for Archie Miller in Indiana" over at our website, assemblycall.com. But here with me tonight, as he was last night for the IU Northwestern postgame show, he's a longtime high school basketball coach in the state of Indiana and the founder of the Delphi Bracketology Club. It's the coach, Brian Tonsoni. Coach, I apparently do not have the Tonsoni time song, or I did not know where it was, so I will play it now.
He remembers the days when a movie cost $1. Heaven help you if you ever decide to pop your collar. Play hard, but remember, fake hustle is a crime. He's the coach and it's Tonsoni time.
So, Coach, now that you've had 24 hours to sleep on the Northwestern game, what are your thoughts at this point this evening on what we witnessed last night?
Well, it's everything you said in a banner moment. It's just time to do things right, and it's a little shocking that it's in year 3 and taking another downturn in order to get some players' attention. And I think responsibility is on the coaching staff. It's also on the players. It's really 50-50. I know it depends on what you're looking at as a fan and who you want to cast the blame to. But I think it's equal. It's disappointing that this is happening, and it's hard to coach a team that's not bought in, and it's tough. And if we heard the post-game press conferences comments, and from what I've heard from some sources that went on in the locker room, hopefully Archie is at a point where he's not going to turn back, and hopefully that does then lead this program to the right direction, whether that is wins or just the fact that he's going to be clear in his expectations. And So change has to be made, and it'll be interesting to see what the lineup is and what the rotations are. And we're going to talk about that later. What shortened rotations might look for or look like, and it's just. I don't know how you put time into your craft and then not want to be focused and engaged. But there is a lot of me in athletics, and sometimes that rears its ugly head. And I think coaches need a psychology degree sometimes to do their job. And the only thing that's keeping me sane is that Indiana has played some good basketball, and it's just 7 minutes, 8 minutes of really selfish, non-engaged, bad basketball that's really hurting Indiana. So I'm not sure it's a stretch to say it can get fixed, but when it's attitudes and effort, I'm not confident that it will get fixed, because that's a default. People will default back to that. Maybe a game or two they can readjust. But if that's who people are, it's really hard to change them. So I'm more concerned that at any point of the season so far, but still trying to remain hopeful.
Yeah, that's a fair way to look at it, I would say, and we'll definitely discuss more of Archie's comments and kind of what that might mean as we go forward. But to my right, he's the senior writer for The Big Lead, the world's most famous unemployed shot doctor, and a man just waiting to dust off his old Chargers gear when Tom Brady comes to town in 2020. He is Ryan Phillips.
Yeah, that's not cool, man. Look, I wasn't on the show last night, and I know Jared advertised that some people had wanted me to be on because my job is to get angry and yell here. I'm gonna do a little of that. Here's the thing: if you're at Indiana and you're playing basketball at Indiana, you can't get excited for a home game at Assembly Hall, and you can't stay focused for 40 minutes, or I at this point I'd even take 30, and you can't be engaged, and you can't dive on the floor, and you can't cut hard and chase down your guys and run back on defense, do the simple things that are expected of you to play college basketball at a high level. I don't think we want you there, and that's not telling certain players to get out. It's just, what are you doing? If you're not in love with basketball and you can't get excited to play for 40 minutes, why are you there? And it just feels like there are stretches where this team is so listless and just does. And I'm sure these guys do care. I'm not suggesting they don't, but it feels like they don't. And there are long stretches of game, and who knows the reason for it. But there are long stretches of games where these guys just lose it. It's usually after they get about a 10-point lead, and then they just lose it. And they just, there's no initiative. There's no excitement. There's no, hey, guess what? We're playing pretty good basketball. Let's keep playing good basketball. It's kind of like, all right, we played good for a little bit. Let's chill. And that's not how you win basketball games. You win basketball games by beating up on a team when you get a lead and pushing it further and making them make mistakes. Sneaking by with a home win against a terrible Northwestern team should not instill confidence. Yeah, they came back and they finally showed some heart at the end, but that shouldn't instill confidence. They got Ohio State coming in this weekend, who's not going to give them that opportunity. And I just feel like this team, and here's the problem I have right now, is that we've seen these lapses now for 3 different teams over 3 seasons. And it's starting to become less about, this team and more about a pattern. And I think Archie Miller, look, I've always said, I think Archie Miller is an incredibly smart basketball mind. I think he's a really good, I think he's a really good about discussing, the game and what needs to be done and the right things and all of that stuff. And I think he's really blunt in his press conference about what's wrong. The problem is there seems to be some kind of translation problem getting that to his players. I don't know if it's having the right players, or it's having this or having that or whatever, but whatever it is, for 3 years, we've seen the same problems with these teams, and that's a problem. And it tells me that Archie Miller, regardless of how smart he is or how good he is or how good he can be or where his ceiling is as a coach, forget all that. He's got a problem and he needs to change what he's doing. And if what you're doing isn't working and what you're doing isn't getting through to the players, you can either change the players or change what you're doing. And right now, it doesn't look like he can change the players. He's got to change what he's doing. And if that means that you're shooting below 30% from 3 and you need to bring in somebody to help these guys develop as shooters, for 3 years in a row you haven't done that, it's time to bring in somebody who develops shooters. If your offense gets bogged down and slows down and gets, it goes through 5-minute stretches where nothing gets produced, you got to change the offense and you got to fix it. And so 3 years of banging your head into the wall, doing the same thing over and over is leading to bad results. Guess what? You need to change what you're doing and fix it. If you want to have a job in Indiana, you got to change what you're doing and you got to fix it, because there are plenty of people who want this job and you got to be better than them. And you got to go out and earn that position every year. This is not, the expectations in Indiana, whether they should be or not, are sky high. And you got to prove yourself every single year. And so far, it just feels like this team and this coaching staff haven't done that year in and year out. And they need to either fix it or get ready to be on the hot seat as firmly as possible, because that's coming if they don't fix these problems.
Yep, and we'll kind of get into a little bit more of that. I think the rotation stuff and some of Archie's other comments after the game really kind of put him in a position where it's put up or shut up time, that you're either going to follow through on the things that were discussed or not. That was a lot of what the post I alluded to earlier that Jared wrote today was about. But this week on the show, we're going to talk about a few other lingering thoughts from IU Northwestern. We'll look at in some depth at what a shortened rotation might actually look like if Archie's going to follow through on the comments that he made in the postgame. And we'll get to your questions. So all of that is coming up this week on Assembly Call Radio. And before we get to all that, a quick reminder about tickets. If you're looking for tickets to IU basketball games for the remainder of the season, either home or away, SeatGeek is the place to look. They deliver the best ticket buying experience with their website and app, and they also will help you identify the best ticket values so that you can get the best possible seat for your money. Best of all, you get $10 off with your first purchase with the promo code Assembly. So use the URL iutickets.shop to go directly to the IU basketball ticket listing on SeatGeek. That's iutickets.shop, and then use the promo code Assembly when you purchase for $10 off. All right, so lingering IU Northwestern thoughts. There's a few things that jumped out to me that are kind of where do we go from here type things outside of the rotational stuff, which I mentioned, we'll get to. So the first question is around Devonte for me. So he clearly was benched. I think you don't have to squint too hard to see that many of Archie's comments post-game were directed or in relation to Devonte, potentially among others, but certainly I think he fit the description of some of the things that were talked about. So I guess he puts himself in a little bit of a difficult spot. So I guess my question to you, Coach, is what does Archie do with Devonte from here? Does he, is there any way that he can turn around and start him on Saturday? And what kind of role, given how things played out, how they played without him, how Devonte played when he was in the game, what kind of next steps would you see from a coaching standpoint to kind of how you handle that situation as you move forward?
Well, and I will piggyback on what Ryan said. You got to change the players, and right now you're not going to kick people off or change the makeup, but you can change the lineup, you can change the rotation. I think that has to be at least step one for Archie Miller. I think step two is you got to change as a coach with your accountability. Why did it wait till Minnesota to have that big meeting and turn things around last year? I think at Dayton, the kids might have been a little different and had a chip on their shoulder, whether they thought they were under-recruited or whatever, and they bought into the intensity. They bought into Coach Miller, wanted to prove a point. I think maybe the makeup of the players here have been a little different, and that's on the head coach. When you get paid millions, you got to figure it out. These are your guys, whether you recruited them or not. And I just think it's been tough both ways, players to adapt to Archie and Archie to adapt to the players. But it's got to get figured out, and it's got to get fixed, and it's got to get changed in some ways. But to your question, Andy, I'm really hoping that Devonte is not in the starting lineup because otherwise the words ring hollow to fans, and that creates more of an optics problem. If you're going to talk, I think it's obvious who the message was being sent to, at least one person, maybe where you don't know the other people he might be referring to. But here's why
I think there are candidates for a few of them.
Yeah, but I think we all know that it was Devonte. But here's why you have to start him, and I think our mediocre guy put something in the community, Jay, that you have a hurting Rob Finney who is just not himself, and injuries and things outside the injuries have really put him behind the 8 ball. And you got a freshman in Armand who has started some, but his play hasn't been necessarily rewarding of a start. So it's one thing, we all want the bench to motivate, but sometimes the guys you put in off the bench aren't the best. And I'm not sure we're at the apocalyptic time where you got to go to Cooper Bybee yet against Ohio State when you're 12-3 and still have your goals. So that's a tough decision. That's the only way that I would accept Devonte, if they had a conversation, if the communication was such that we don't know about, that hey, Devonte talks a good game or something. But I really do think that I would not start him. And to send a signal. He's going to have to play. I'm not sure you can bury him out of the rotation. We'll talk about that in the second segment. But you play him if he's doing the right things. He gets more minutes. If not, it's a quick hook with Devonte.
Yeah, I think the leash is incredibly short at this point because
Yeah,
otherwise, like you said, Coach, you've really put yourself in a position coming out there after the game and saying this that you really can't tolerate any of the things that he's tolerated so far. And if you see even the first sign of it from certainly a guy that you without saying his name really called out in the post game, you put yourself in a really tough spot. So I think short leash for sure as we go forward with him.
I would never ask fans to go back and watch that Northwestern game, but you want to see the problem. Look at Devonte's body language while playing. I know there's some pictures and all that kind of stuff and what he was like when he was not in the game. I noticed it in the first 4 minutes. Of just the way he was ball handling and nonchalant. I said casual last night on the show, and that's something that
he plays
that
like it's
was,
a pickup game.
Yeah.
He plays like it's a pickup game, and he plays with the intensity of a pickup game. And I'm not talking like a Rucker Park pickup game where you're going to get famous if you play
right.
well. He plays like you're just at the
hyper.
You're just down at the park with your friends, and. I don't know if that's just his personality. And if it is, there's nothing going to change that. No motivational technique is going to change that. It's just who he is as a guy. And it's so funny when you see his brother, who's a really intense defender and a guy who works on his craft so hard. I'm not saying Devonte doesn't work on his craft, but it doesn't show up on the court. Like the intensity doesn't show up on the court. And again, a lot of these guys, I'm sure, feel like they're giving 100% and think they're doing their best. But it's clear there's more there from all of them. And they're a lot of them are elite athletes. When you put them on the scale with normal humans like us, these guys are elite level athletes and players and all of that. And it just doesn't come out on the floor. While we're mentioning this, the one guy you've got to give credit to, and some other guys kind of stepped up as the wave cascaded last night, was Al Durham. Al Durham, we've been rough on this year for his disappearing acts in games. Al Durham showed up and played hard. He only hit 2 of 7 shots from the field, but he made offense by getting fouled and going to the line. He moved. He played with intensity on defense, and he just he would get to the free throw line and get excited, and a little bit of effort goes a long way. It's a little bit of that extra sort of vibe and effort goes a long way, and Durham showed that last night. It's easy. The game conceptually is not that hard. If you play intense, smart basketball and you play defense, you'll win games. And it's not hard to figure out. And you see a little intensity from Al Durham was able to raise the rest of his team's game, the rest of his teammates' games, and got a win over Northwestern, who was up 10 on Indiana. You can beat a Big Ten opponent when you're down 10 just by showing a little enthusiasm and effort. It's not that hard when you're a better team than the other team. And this team has enough talent to win games. They have to play smart. They have to play defense. They have to do all of those right things, but they have enough talent to compete with anyone in this conference. They do. If they play well.
They lack toughness. Because when you start the game and things are going well and you've been taught what to do and things are going well, but the minute that adversity hits, this team collectively, and not collectively, a few of the guys hang their heads, and then it just snowballs because when you hang your head, that intensity wanes, the engagement wanes, and one bad offensive possession becomes 3, 4, 5 because good teams handle adversity, and after one or two bad possessions, they turn it around real quick. You have a good leader, someone gets into everyone and gets it turned around. And boy, one sign of a couple bad possessions, and boy, it's scare time. It's like, oh my gosh,
toughness.
It's
toughness
it's
and
just
heart.
toughness.
You know this, Coach. Toughness,
Yeah.
heart, and focus go a long way to winning basketball games.
Overcome talent.
More important than scheme, almost more important than talent, as you said, is just focus, toughness, and heart, man. You just have a plan, execute that plan, and don't give up and don't be lackadaisical. Just get after it.
And Ryan, that's where I'm kind of a little defensive of Archie, but I am questioning it too because I thought he was toughness and I thought he would breed that in. It's hard to give kids who don't have that naturally. You've got to bring it out of them somehow. You got to demand it. But at some point, if they don't bring the toughness that you want as a coach that represents your program, you sit, regardless of the talent. And that's the one problem I've had with the 11-man rotation, and I think trying to make everyone happy as he moved into the program with a variety of recruits, I think he really tried to make sure that there was team chemistry in that, almost to a fault, to a point where too much of a player's kind of coach and not enough of a drill sergeant, from a long ways away, though, but at least my take.
All right. Well, I think that mention of the 11-man rotation is a good place to kind of stop and segue to the next segment. So coming up, Archie did mention last night during the post-game press conference, it might be time to shorten the rotation. Is that the right move? And who should be in and who should be out? We'll talk about it next. Stick with us on the Assembly Call. All right.
All righty.
You're about 20, almost 22 minutes on there, so
that's decent.
That's fine. Yeah, we can make it up later, so we're good.
Messages.
Yeah, I did see a couple people in the chat mentioning the that picture. We did have that to talk about, but I think a lot of the stuff about Devonte was there of basically everybody else on the bench standing up and Devonte and Duran not at some point during the comeback. So yeah, I think people are gonna drawn the conclusions that they want to from that. I think Coach made a good point about just watch his body language on the court. To me, that was it almost doesn't matter what you do on the bench at that point when you're jogging through cuts and doing some of the stuff that he was doing throughout the game.
Well, I do scout bench stuff for our team. You got to be careful with one moment. You got to look at it over the course of the game. If Duran's sitting every time there's a big play, there's an issue. If it's just once and he was up 4 or 5 other times, so a still picture. While I think it looks bad, and I have questioned Duran's body language on the bench from me just watching it because I watch those things, and I do think there's a potential issue there. You got to be careful with one still shot.
Yeah, I would agree. All right. So I think we are good. What's going on in that Purdue Michigan game now? I heard
Michigan,
double overtime at some point.
Yeah, Michigan's going to win it, I think. They are in double overtime. Michigan's up 6, 79-73 with 58 seconds to go.
Got it.
You know, Kent makes a good point in the chat about Archie is stubborn, as most coaches are. You're going to go a week or two longer with the rotation or a starting lineup than you probably should at some point because you just have made that decision. And I think better coaches have a better feel when to make a move, when not to make a move.
Yeah.
Yep.
I agree with you. I mean,
greatest strength can be your greatest weakness. You know, if you're tough-minded and stubborn, that could be really good, but it also at sometimes can be bad.
Yes, it can be.
All right, we'll start here. We'll just kind of jump into the rotation stuff. I think, like I said, a couple of these Demezi and Jerome questions fit pretty well in here. And if we got a chance to circle back to Justin, I think we can do that at that point.
All righty.
All right.
This is Jordan Halls, and I never miss a shot or an episode of the Assembly Call.
Thank you, Jordan, and welcome back to the Assembly Call. You can find all of our content at our website, assemblycall.com. And if you ever want to join the chat mob during our unedited live broadcast or watch those replays and see all the between segment banter, then check out our YouTube channel at youtube.com/assemblycall. I'm Andy Bottoms here with Ryan Phillips and the coach Brian Tonsoni. And we wanted to talk about some comments that Archie Miller made after the Northwestern game. The quote here, I'll be honest with you, I don't necessarily know right now if the 11-guy rotation is going to work. I just don't know necessarily if that's the best thing moving forward if we're not going to get all 11 heated up and playing as hard and as unselfish as we possibly can. It may be 5. It may be just 5. I don't know. So I guess the easiest place to start with this particular question is really if everyone agrees that that's the way to go and the path forward for this team. The rotation was really shortened last night. I know on Inside the Hall they talked about that, just how little subbing there really was over the last 10 minutes. I think 3 subs potentially just over that time period. So if everybody agrees and Archie is really bound to follow through on that, the question becomes, what does that rotation actually look like? So the guys in my head who would be a part of that really regardless would be Trace, Brunk, Finney, again, we're going to assume some level of health, Justin Smith and Al Durham. Those feel like the 5 that are for sure there.
Have to play. Yeah, they have to.
Maybe I'm missing somebody else. I think Devonte, we would have all probably said fell in that category, but in light of last night, maybe that's not a given. So are you guys in agreement that those 5 are kind of
assuming full health with Finney?
Yes.
Assuming Finney gets better and this is at the optimum roster, yes, I agree.
So then
Without
I think
him, then it just throws it into a mess, honestly.
Yeah. So we had a couple questions because I think the next place to go is you kind of start to look down the roster and figure out which guys might look or feel a little bit duplicative out there. And so we had a couple questions around essentially Jerome Hunter and Demezi. Bay Area Hoosier, doesn't seem like major progress thus far from Jerome or Demezi, which if either becomes a meaningful contributor as the season progresses, or do you see both being a victim of a shorter bench? And then Max had some thoughts on Hunter. I kind of jokingly said he feels like a chucker at this point last night. The reality is,
right?
Reality, yeah, well, yeah. Reality is with him, he just seems hell bent on standing behind the 3-point line or taking step back threes. Really doesn't seem either confident or intent on getting other parts of his game going. And I think that's been the struggle, because I think everybody who watched tape of him as a recruit and all those kinds of things saw a pretty versatile guy.
Yeah, or he can do both for sure.
He's really become one-dimensional, and the one dimension is not working all that well. So that's kind of the first coin flip, I guess, if you look between those two guys. I think coming into last night, Demezi would have been the answer if you were going to pick one of those two guys, but Jerome came off the bench before him a night ago. And so now you're kind of left wondering if one of those two guys is going to be one of the guys who loses out in that scenario, which one is it? So Coach, I'll throw that to you first. Do you have a lean one way or the other of who you think, if only one guy emerges from that, which one is it?
You know, I'm going to say Jerome Hunter, because you learn more from a game than you do from practice. And one of the things, Ryan knows this too, when you cover coaches and you hear coaches in press conferences, we've had some luxury of covering some games, and the coach from up north up here, while we might not like him because he coaches there, has some really good things to say. But they were talking about the development of one of his sophomores, and he basically said he's getting to figure it out because he gets to play. When he only got 6 to 9 minutes the year before, it was a little difficult. His job was to come in and not mess up. And now the job is different because you're getting 15 to 25 minutes as a sophomore. And so that does play. I'm looking at this as a developmental program now, and we still want to get wins. I think getting Jerome back to possible where he was when he was recruited is a big part of moving this program forward, and he needs minutes. And hopefully they're good minutes. And if for some reason they're not, in my State of Indiana report in the community, on Mighty Networks, I was really pleased with Demezi. I think he's really tried to get better, and I think his attitude's been good. I think he's defended better. I think really Demezi needs to be better on offense right now. He's defensively, he's earned that. So overall, I like 8-9 man rotations. I think part of the problem in the runs is that you get in the flow and then they're subbed out, and they don't get major minutes. I believe your best guys got to get 28 to 33 minutes on a regular basis and play together. The combinations are important as well. And Jerome might have been told to be aggressive offensively. I've seen a different aggressiveness with him in the last 2 weeks. That might be
He's
the coaching
definitely
staff.
willing to shoot. Yeah.
The coaches sometimes will say that, hey, you get 6 minutes. We need 4 or 5 shots from you. Don't pass up shots. We need you to take shots as trying to find some offense. So I'm not so upset with him trying to chuck stuff, because if he starts hitting bank shots or not, that's going to help our team. I would pick Jerome in that scenario just based on the future of where he's going, and he would back up Justin at the 3. Go with 3-guard lineup, 2 at a time with a third-man rotation. Go with the 2-man post, 4 and 5, with the third man being Race. And there's your 8, and Demezi be 9. But that's where I'd go.
Yeah, I want to agree with you, Coach, but I want to say something different about Jerome. I just think he's more versatile than
Right.
Demezi. Jerome can get a rebound, and if he can't get the outlet pass, he can bring the ball up the court. Demezi's kind of hopeless when that happens.
He can post too.
He can post. He can move the ball up the court. I feel like his awareness defensively, while not perfect, has gotten much better. As has Demezi's. I'll give him credit as well. He's defended better off the dribble. I mean, there were times when he came in the preseason and in those exhibition games and early in the season where teams would just attack Demezi. I mean, immediately they would just swing the ball, find who was guarding him and who he was guarding, and just attack. Jerome is a guy I feel like is slowed down a little by the injury and getting back into shape and playing basketball again, but I feel like he's got more versatility to him. I feel like he can post. I feel like he can dribble and drive and handle the ball and not give it away. And one thing that's maddening about Demezi is he'll get a rebound or a pass and just get it knocked out of his hand really easily. He just doesn't have strong hands, and maybe that's something that needs to be developed in the offseason. We saw it last year, and it clearly didn't get much better. That's something that needs to change. He needs to grip the ball when he gets it, instead of just kind of hanging it out there. But I just think Jerome is a more versatile guy. He's a higher ceiling guy for sure. And I feel like at some point, and Jared and I have talked about this on Banner Money, at some point that guy's going to hit a couple shots, whether it's inside, outside, whatever. He's going to get a couple to fall. And you just look at him, with his size and his athletic ability, you get that guy going and things look different for the bench right now. Right now they're kind of hopeless off the bench, but you get that guy going, it's great. So if you want to put a ceiling on this season, and raise it a little bit, that's the guy you got to get going. I feel like Demezi could come in and hit a couple threes, but he's not going to give you the versatility that Jerome is.
Yeah, I think the question really with either guy, and last night was not the best example because I think combined they only played 11 minutes. So even if you said I'm going to give all the minutes to one guy, that would really only have been 2 additional minutes for Jerome. And Jay makes a good point in the chat. I think there's a component of him being a little bit skittish to get into a lot of contact given, the injury history and some of those kinds of things. And I think that's true. They got to find a different way to get him going, because having him stand on the 3-point line and just shoot, it to me is not working. And while he may be given that instruction to, go in, don't pass up shots and things like that.
We also got to look at how many times is he coming in when there's 2 post players and there's no room to go. I know,
but that's the way this team's going to be. I mean, if the core set of guys that we talked about is going to be there, like there's not going to be a lot of room to post. So I think the other question really comes in. I think everybody would agree Race Thompson is probably another bench guy. I know Ryan would. Duran feels like an odd man out in that scenario if you're looking for another inside guy that you're not going to play. I mean, they really rode Brunk and Trace down the stretch last night. We talked about after the game that despite the shortcomings that Brunk has in different elements of his game, the level of effort and passion with which he plays is something this team really needs to have on the court.
Game changer. It can be a game changer. Yeah.
So then I think it kind of comes to the other guard spot. A lot of that ties back to that question with Devonte and what really how he responds to what happened last night, how Archie handles him after what happened there. And I think the struggle becomes Armand Franklin has struggled since the Notre Dame game for sure. I think in some of the cases he's taken open shots that he's got to get more comfortable knocking down. He's not taking great care of the basketball which is really the biggest thing. But he played. He was a key part of that run because Finney, I think, came in maybe about the 5-minute mark when he came in for Durham. So it was really Durham and Armand who were in there when the run was taking place. So I think that's a guy that you got to try to figure out, like, can you really trust him to play, 12, 15 minutes a game?
He can
At this
keep his
point, I
hands
think
to himself
the jury's
defensively.
still out on that, but I
Yeah.
think that's the other kind of swing question at this point is how much
but
you can get out of him.
If he doesn't reach defensively, I'd be fine with having him on the floor just for defense. Like, and just tell him whatever you get offensively is a bonus. Right now is obviously you want to get more offense from him as you move along. But is the one problem that he has is when he's guarding a tough defender and the guy gets the ball, he immediately puts his hands on him. As I'm sure it's just a reflex, but he puts at least one hand like right on the guy's hip, and then he'll put another. And as soon as that guy drives, that's a foul every single time, and it's going to get called every single time. It's a natural instinct. I know he got away with it in high school, all that. That guy's got to guard with his feet, not with his hands. That is the one thing. And if he does that, then it's better to have him on the floor because he doesn't hurt you as much consistently offensively as some of the other guys do.
I'm struggling because in this question, guys, because right now it's just about the foundation for me. Everyone's right on the X's and O's. If it's the X's and O's, Devonte's got to play a major minutes because he's good and he can go off for 30. But I'm tired of people not playing the Indiana way. And so in my head, this is where I would be stubborn. I'm going to play guys who compete, whether they hand check on defense, whether they turn the ball over on offense, with Race gets a tough rebound and outlets it to the other team by mistake at Maryland. I'm going to play the guys who are my guys' toughness. And if you're not my guy and you're not tough, I don't care what your skill level is, I'm not playing you. And that's not good coaching because that's coaching angry. And we've all, if you're in the business, you've coached angry, and that's when you sub way too much every mistake, and then kids are looking over their shoulder, and then they don't play free.
Nobody gets in a rhythm.
Nobody gets in a rhythm, and everyone's scared to make mistakes because it's going to affect their playing time. So you can't coach angry, but you can't coach nice. You got to be in that middle. But right now, there needs to be a message sent. And I'll play Armand over Devonte just because I think he's an Indiana guy that we're going to really enjoy for 4 years. And again, if we're going to get beat and look bad doing it, we might as well look bad with the X's and O's and the hand checks and all those things from young guys who are laying it on the line to get them game experience. So the next few years, we're not getting their first experience in big major minutes. When graduation and things hit. So that's not fair. I'm not really proud that I said that just now, but that's part of the anger that I have.
Forever, coach.
Well, I know better. Right. I know better as a coach because it's a long season. It's 12-3. You can't just look at one segment and just overreact as a coach because that's not good either. But my goodness, 6 games in a row where there's been major runs and major head hanging and woe is me because I missed a shot or I didn't get a shot. That stuff should be eliminated. And so that's where my 8-9-man rotation. And in all honesty, hopefully in good coaching, if Devonte's playing well and has good body language, we run with him. If not, done. Then you get another chance the next game. And it's just simple for him. Do it right or sit.
Yeah. And I think that's really where, we're going to beat this to death, I feel like, but that's really where all the things that were said in the post game last night, like those have to come to fruition as soon as Saturday and say, look, I'm not putting up with this. I didn't put up with it in this game. And we were able to come back from a deficit. You can't backtrack on that kind of stuff at that point. And I think the challenge is a little bit is, and the Crimson Cast guys talked about this as well today, is that it's fine to say that you want a 7 or 8 man rotation. The problem is that you have no idea which 7 or 8 guys are going to show up ready to play on a given night with this team. And I think that probably leads to a little bit more of what you saw down the stretch last night, where he's really going to ride guys as they're playing well. And I think that's, you talked about substitution patterns, and I know we had a question about that as well. I just think there's been some things there where teams got good chemistry, good momentum, and then you sub somebody out. It's one of those years. I don't miss the time that I spent doing all the lineup analysis that I used to do after these shows, but there's part of me that it would have been interesting to look at some of those things over the course of the season and do that. But I guess I'm glad that I'm not staying up to like 1 in the morning.
An 11-man rotation makes substitution patterns just tough.
It's a nightmare.
And a flow
Aren't you glad
of
you're not
play
doing that
tough.
anymore, Andy?
I'm really glad. Really quite glad. other than it would be nice to be able to answer my own questions sometimes, but we'll do what we can. So we'll wrap this up with another comment that Archie made this week. Ryan, you said you wanted to chime in on this. On the coach's show on Monday, there was a question came up about the 3-point shooting. I can't imagine why. But Archie basically said it was BS that this team didn't shoot the ball well. So I will open the floor to you. I know Zach Osterman wrote something this week that refuted that with some statistics,
Numbers.
at least based on what is actually happening and what we're all observing. But what were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, what Archie said was that he thought it was BS that they can't shoot, not that they were missing them. He said that the problem is, and I even tweeted.
Well, the missing is inarguable at this point.
Yeah,
isn't that really?
And what I said, and I responded to Matt Glasgow, the Indy Star, put up his statistic. And I said, look, I think what Archie's saying isn't necessarily wrong, that they're incapable of making threes. They're just shooting bad threes. They're guarded or they're forcing them late when the offense is bogged down, or they're taking them early when they should. Like, they're not shooting good threes. Like, even ones that are open sometimes, if they're not off a reversal or something like that, it's a problem. You got to shoot them in rhythm. And I don't think I would never argue they're great shooters on this team, but there's ways to clean up those numbers a little bit. And we've talked about it. It's running sets for shooters. It's running guys off screens and getting them open and
fellas, it's point guard play.
Yeah.
You got to penetrate the defense, and then you got to hit the shooter in rhythm in their shooting pocket so they can get the shot off quick.
Yeah. With a perfect
And
pass.
our point guard has been injured and non-effective when he's been in the game. Yeah, our 32-minute point guard. And so, Al Durham, bless his heart, is trying to be the point guard, but he's just not the same. No. And that whole rhythm, the guard play, is why the ball doesn't go in the post when it needs to, and the guard play is why the threes are out of rhythm and look bad, because they're not getting to the right spots at the right time.
And what I would say about the three-point shooting, it becomes a bigger deal. So we all know, I know this sounds very obvious, and I said it on Banner Monday. It's very obvious, but the reason that three-point shooting is important is because you get an extra point. Basically, that's why it's important. You get an extra point every time you make one. If you're missing,
Phillips, big time math guy.
There you go. But if you're
Breaking news.
If you're not adding those extra points, if you're not tacking those on, you need to get them somewhere else because everybody else is getting them. Where do you get them? You get them at the free throw line if you can't get them elsewhere. And in the games where Indiana has not shot free throws, they've lost largely because they can't hit those outside shots to balance that out. And against Northwestern, they won because they got to the free throw line. It's the only reason they won was because late they got to the free throw line. And they earned a lot of those fouls early and everything like that. But they made 23 of 30 free throws. And that's where they won the game. So if you're not shooting from the outside, you need to find a way to get to the free throw line. And what has happened, I think, with Indiana, when they've been in bad stretches of play, just throw the ball into the post, drive into the middle, do something where at least you could get fouled and get some free throws out of it, or at least make progress towards the point where you're in the bonus and you're making free throws. I just feel like too much when this offense gets bogged down, the ball goes side to side, side to side, side to side. And it's like, oh man, there's 10 seconds left. We got to do something. And it's a problem. If you're not shooting threes, you can win games when you don't shoot threes if you find those extra points somewhere else, and they need to start getting to the line more consistently.
Absolutely right, and that's why transition offense is going to be a key. Get transition post touches, get transition fouls, get the other team in foul trouble, get to the bonus, and maybe get some transition threes where you throw it inside, they collapse, you kick out, and you have a step-in three from the paint
in rhythm
touch.
Moving forward.
Rhythm moving forward. The first 6 shots were that. If you go back at 3 for 6 before we missed the last 8, they were transition, in rhythm, inside, out, stepping in, shooting. And I think that's what Archie meant, that, yes, we can shoot at least effectively. It's not like it's never going to be there. It just has to be better basketball.
Well, and the other thing is if you're driving downhill like that, that aggressiveness wears off on the rest of your team. And so they see you getting rewarded for driving hard into the paint. You may not make the shot. I mean, Al Durham didn't make shots, in the paint yesterday, really. He made his he got his points at the free throw line, but other people started being aggressive after they saw that. It's like, hey, we can all get rewarded from just being aggressive. And that should be your default setting, is to be aggressive on offense, not to sort of look and maybe hunt for a little thing over here or try and, come in over here. No, go to the hoop, get there, give the ball to your best player in a place where he might get fouled. And that rubs off on everybody else. That aggressiveness and that focus and that intensity or what this team's missing.
Yep. All right. Well, coming up on our third segment, we'll answer more of your questions. We've got the mediocre question of the week back, and we'll also discuss what it means for a team to come back from the brink of catastrophe like IU did last night. That and more. Stick with us here on the Assembly Call. All right, we're at 42-20.
You get Coach and I going, man. You get two Italians talking, and it's just gonna take
Yeah,
the
no
whole
kidding.
show, man.
Hey.
Okay, so we got about 7 minutes for questions. So we'll definitely do the mediocre question, and then we'll hit Patrick's question because I think that's the one Jared was alluding to.
We got to get our weekly mediocre question.
Yeah, I said that. That's the first thing I said. God, try to pay attention.
Sorry. I've got like 5 things going on right now, and I missed that. So
I know that's difficult. The one thing I'll say about Armand, I didn't want to jump in and circle back to this, but there was a play toward the end of the Arkansas game when we were there, and I don't know what IU was down and in kind of desperation mode where they really needed a basket, and so a shot was missed, and like a few of the guys turned and started like running like back on defense, at which point, though, like, it doesn't really matter if you get back on defense at this point. Like, you need the ball.
Yeah.
And the only 2 guys that dove on the floor after the ball were Trace and Armand. So
yeah, I
think if you go back to some of the things that Coach said, I think that's where he fits into that. Like, he really does play hard. And I joked last night that he apparently is a designated guy to stick with the ball with the shot clock running out. Because that seems to happen a couple times a game. But I think some of that, and I'd say the same thing with Jerome, you're going to have to figure out like who you're going to let play through some of these things. And at what point is the experience that they're getting valuable enough that you'll live with their mistakes because they're playing hard versus mistakes because they're playing like they don't care.
Well, here's the thing.
That's what you gotta find.
If you look at the 3 guys, there are 4 guys who will dive on the floor after the ball. In my opinion, right now, I'll keep Finney out of this. I think normally he is a kind of guy who will hustle like that, but I just feel like he's out of it right now and injured and all that stuff. So he's not going to do that. But I think that right now, the 4 guys who would dive on the floor for the ball, I think Trace would do it. I think Armand would do it, as you said. I think Race Thompson will go do whatever it takes to get the ball. And then I think that Al Durham. And Al Durham hasn't always been that way, but the way he played yesterday, I'm like, okay, this
Joey
is a guy
Brunk?
who's a game. Joey Brunk would too.
Brunk
He's so big that I don't see him as like he does hustle after the ball, yes, but he's so big that I don't see him diving for stuff. It's more like lunging and lurching and, but yes, Joey Brunk provides that same energy as those guys. I agree.
Yep.
So it's a shame that you can only name a few guys, on that roster that will do it.
Yeah, I'm real curious to see how Saturday shakes out on a variety of levels. So.
Yeah, we all are, Andy.
I believe a noon start too, Ryan. So the Ryan Phillips special yet again.
I know you don't like. I get to watch it at least because we got a game Saturday night.
I was going to say, I think I get
to
watch it.
12-2. That's all I get to watch college basketball before I got to head in for our shoot around, and I got the scouts Saturday, so I got to run the.
I was going to say we've got a game on the other side of town, but I think I can watch most, if not all of it, before we got to leave to go. But
is it just Jared and I on Saturday?
I think so. Yeah, it won't be me because I got to drive across.
No. You guys got plenty of stuff going on.
So
sticking me with Morris, huh? Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
What are you gonna do? These things happen.
Jared, you missed this. Ryan, you missed this on the post game show, or one of the times I was telling last game I got told to shut up by the head coach. It was beautiful.
Oh yeah, no, I heard that.
Did you hear that? He and I are so tight, and everyone thinks it's really big strategy, and you're wondering about substitutions, and it's just it's like it's your best friend, man. You work with them all the time. Hey, you want to do this? Shut up. Oh, okay. I guess you don't want to do that.
Simple no would have been fine, but that will suffice.
How much time do we have on this last segment?
We got about 7 minutes to answer questions. So we'll do at least the first 2. We'll do Jay's first, then we'll do we'll do Patrick's, and then we'll kind of see what we've got from there. All right. Yeah, we'll do those, and then we'll kind of see what happens. All right, I got to get the mediocre question intro queued up here. I had the Tonsoni time on here, and then it was just kind of out of order, and I thought I didn't have it. So That's what happens when the backup is in. It wasn't for lack of effort, just poor preparation. All right.
This is Nick Zeisloft. I never miss an open three, and I never miss an episode of the Assembly Call.
Welcome back to the Assembly Call. I'm Andy Bottoms here with Ryan Phillips and the coach, Brian Tonsoni. And remember, you need to be subscribed to our email newsletter. We send out a weekly IU news roundup, even during the offseason. And after every game, we send out a detailed post-game analysis. Just text IU to 66866 or go to assemblycall.com. That's IU to 66866 or go to assemblycall.com. All right, now it's time for our mailbag, and all questions were submitted via our private IU basketball discussion community, which you can find out more about at assemblycall.com/community. All right, so now it's time for what everyone has always been waiting for. It's the mediocre question of the week.
It's not that good, but it's not that bad. It's Jay's mediocre question.
Easily my favorite audio on this show. Not even close.
It's good. It's good. I'm not gonna lie. I must have missed the first time it was used, but Jared sent it to me today, so I made sure that I had it when I was hosting. So, all right. So Jay's question this week: we are now 15 games into a 31-game regular season schedule. IU is 12-3, 2-2 in the Big Ten. I think most fans would have taken that record to this point, even though the current attitude of the fan base, or at least a very vocal portion of it, is very negative. Has your definition of a successful season changed now that the season is half over? What does IU need to do over its remaining games for you to consider this season a success? And what outcome would quiet some of the very outspoken negative voices in the IU fan base? So, Ryan, I'll throw that one to you first.
Well, you're never going to quiet the negative voices until you win a national championship. Let's just be honest. Indiana's fans are a little nutty. Every fan base has their crazy, nutty portion, but 5 national championships and all the expenditures that this program has in it, you expect national championships. And that's where the goal should be, obviously, consistently competing for that. But I will say that I think that for me, the definition of success is still where it always is: the Sweet 16 and top 4 in the Big Ten. Big Ten's wide open this year. Anybody could sneak into that top 4, legitimately. Teams are losing in places they should not lose every night of this season. So I think that is still fully attainable. The problem is that this team has to get there, and this team has to improve a lot to be on that level. But I look, if you make the Sweet 16 and you bring back almost all of these guys, and top 4 in the Big Ten, you bring back almost all of these guys and all your important rotation players, and you add the new recruits to it, people will be excited about next season. That will get people excited more than it will have them focusing on the negative. So I think that's what my definition of success is this year.
Coach, what about you?
Mine has changed, sadly, because I'm just really disappointed in the upperclassmen's approach to playing basketball. I think all of those comments, getting to the tournament, obviously, it would be a successful season. But it's almost to the point now where just finding the guys who do things right and playing them and developing them and getting them minutes, to me, would be a success, instead of wasting minutes on people that aren't going to be here and don't care to be here. And that's just not good. I want to make the tournament. It's very iffy right now, even at 12-3. As you know, Andy, when you put your bracketology together, it's kind of just hoping Indiana can be on that 10 or 11 line. So I'm not sure that's attainable with where we see them, unless things change, and we can always hold out hope. But making the tournament for me would obviously be successful at this point.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think what you really want to see as much as anything is, what we've seen from this team recently doesn't give you a lot of hope that goal of success is really attainable. Nope. And so for me, it's a little bit of what Coach said, just in terms of being able to reestablish what the effort is, and for this team to actually find an identity of what is IU basketball going to be under Archie Miller. I think everybody had an idea of what that was going to look like, and you see glimpses of it, but those glimpses feel like they get fewer and farther between. And so at some point you have to establish who your core guys are going forward. And at this point, based on all the stuff we've talked about, that's really what I'm looking for. I don't know that defines success, but you can't go into another offseason not knowing who you can count on in a given year. And we have probably talked ourselves into some guys that we had reasons to say, I don't know that we believe that this can actually happen going forward, but you got to see something so you can establish who the core is, what the foundation is, and where things go from there. All right. Next question is from Patrick. We were dead in the water last night. It was palpable. Yet a team of guys, not a full team, stuck with it and responded. I'm not religious, but my girlfriend is, and she turned to me and said, "This is Lazarus. This is resurrection." Can you talk about what it means when a team does respond that way, but focus on the choices and actions that lead to the response? So, Coach, I'll go to you first on this one. We don't have a ton of time, but I'm going to quick thoughts at least.
Being 12-3 with where this team is, with a bunch of guys underachieving, is really remarkable once you get over the anger and the disappointing level of play. Most of the talent is underachieving, some of it due to injury at the sophomore level, some of it because of mental approach at the upper level. But this team should not be 12-3. That has to give a little bit of hope for us, too, that they fought back at Notre Dame after being down. They fought back at, Nebraska, and not the way we want to see it play out. But those could have been losses, and we're at 8-7 and 9-6, and the boat is really sinking. So there is some toughness. It's just not enough consistency to be a really good program at this time.
Ryan, about 30 seconds. What do you take away from the team being able to respond in that scenario?
The book of Archie that was left out of the Bible, apparently. Look, I'm happy they won, but at the same time, they should have never been in that position, and that's what disappoints me. I think it was great that certain guys responded, but that's only great if it carries over to the next game, and Coach and I have talked about this a lot. It's less about what you've done and more about how you respond to what you've done and how you carry that forward. And if that doesn't carry forward, it didn't matter that they beat Northwestern.
That's it. We're done. No more questions.
All right. Well, that is going to do it for us on this week's edition of the Assembly Call. If you want to see us do the show live, join us at assemblycall.com on Thursday nights for the live broadcast of our Assembly Call radio recording. And don't forget to go to assemblycall.com or text IU to 66866 to join our free email newsletter. Special thanks to Bob Thompson for producing most of the music you hear on the show. And thank you for listening. We'll talk to you again next Thursday night, as well as Saturday after the Ohio State game. Until then, keep your elbows in and your eyes on the rim, and go Hoosiers.
Thank everybody for coming out.
All right, I got to get out of here, folks. Thank you.
All right.
Real quick, some stuff in the chat room talking about schedule. I don't know, Andy, if you've seen this. I was surprised a little bit that in the net rankings, Indiana's strength of schedule is in the high 50s, low 60s, which is not bad when you start looking.
I've been surprised by that too.
When you look
is everybody just scheduling poorly now?
Well, Penn State has a 287 non-conference schedule. So when you say that Indiana's only beaten one team in the tournament, there's a lot of teams that are in our bracket and Andy's bracket that have only beaten one team. Some of them have beaten no teams that would be in the tournament. It's still early in the season for all of that. So be careful in saying that as a negative towards Indiana, because Andy and I could give you about 20 or 30 teams that are in heavy consideration for the tournament that are in the same boat. But it's surprising, the schedule. I think recently it was 61 or 62.
Yeah. And that's not likely to drop off dramatically from there based on where we already are at this point. Yeah, Louisiana Tech win continues to look pretty good. And
yeah, they got smoked today, though.
Oh, did they?
Yeah, by 20.
Oh, it's a shame.
Don't do that.
I know. I now root for Notre Dame.
Stop doing that.
I root for Arkansas.
Yeah, they got beat.
But that even if those teams falter some, you just don't want to be in the 200s, because if you're on the bubble and you're competing against another, that's not a huge piece of criteria. But if it's down to two or three teams and you have a 280 and someone else has a 70 or an 80, that 70 or 80 is going to be looked upon maybe as a deciding factor.
Well, and really, I mean, the only game after last night, the only game that's left that, at least the last time I looked, that isn't a quad 1 or quad 2 for IU is playing at Nebraska, which kind of depends on which team they have show up, but they've been better at home. So maybe that even works its way into a quad too. But yeah, you basically have one game left where you're trying not to stub your toe. Now you can't completely fall flat on your face in all the other
And lose all the
opportunities,
other
but you've
ones,
got
yeah.
a ton of opportunities is the good thing. But
Win
that's
one,
why
win
I
one,
figured
lose
out,
one.
yeah, that's why I figured out how to turn the corner from Northwestern becomes so important. You've got every opportunity right in front of you, and
Yep.
we'll just see what happens from there. But
You go 500, and I think Indiana's going to find its way in. Might not be a great seed, but if you win, what would that be? 7 more wins, 8 more wins on the season. That's going to go in quad 1, quad 2 for the most point, and
Got to get lucky, man. You got to have these Big Ten teams stop showing up, like not show up on the road all season. I mean, nobody is showing up on the road. It's crazy. It's not just that it's not just that, it's tough to win on the road in this conference as it always is, but teams legitimately just aren't playing well on the road. I mean, then you have
these like weird blips where like Wisconsin plays well at Ohio State and wins that, but then they go home and lose to Illinois. I mean, that's a good road win for Illinois. So I don't know. So let's hit a couple of these other questions that were sitting in here. I know one of these was kind of going on in the chat. Fred asked, any thoughts on why Rob is playing so poorly? I know we talked about a little bit with him last night, trying to figure out whether, starting him is better, that you get him warmed up, and it seems like the more he plays, the better he ends up being. I know, Coach, you responded to a couple people in the chat. I don't know if you want to hit that real quick.
Sometimes we get a lot of information from people around Bloomington and the program, and we need to be very, very careful with what we say, because these are young men and they have families and everything. But I just want to say this about Rob. Rob has been injured, and Rob's had a tough time overcoming the injuries, and it's beyond basketball. And we hope that he gets back to being Rob as soon as possible. But hang in there with Rob. Rob is committed to playing basketball at Indiana, I believe, and I think he's a big part of the production that needs to get better in the second half. I don't feel Rob's tuned out. I don't think Rob's body language, he's out of shape. He's frustrated that he can't do the things he wanted, and so you see some of the hands up when he makes a turnover, and that, I think, is more frustration than not being an Indiana guy. Rob wants to be out there. It's just been a big struggle that his health has lingered on and on and on. And you know this, Ryan, with your ankle, how tough it is, when you sprain an ankle and you can't get back right away.
Many top athletes, including Ryan Phillips would.
We have a D1 level athlete on the show who knows how hard it is to be injured. So hang in there with Rob.
Yeah, look, there's I think, as is probably not hard to imagine right now, there's more going on with Rob than is public and is known and all that. And I think it's just, it stinks because it feels at times like a lost season, but it's not a lost season. There's still plenty of time, and hopefully everything gets turned around and gets better. But he's not fully healthy. He's dealing with something that's an abdominal injury that probably won't be better until the off season. Archie said that publicly, but there's also stuff going on behind the scenes that we don't even know the full extent of, or whatever. But there's more to what's going on, and it has nothing to do with Rob not wanting to be at Indiana or anything like that. So I think everybody needs to, when you see he's not starting, I will say this about Archie, and I've questioned Archie over the last couple of weeks and his coaching and what he's doing. When you see Rob Finney not starting, it's not because Archie doesn't want him to be starting. It's because he may not be able to right now.
There's might be a minutes restriction too. You might be sitting there planning, if we need Rob, when are we going to need him? How are we going to need him? And maybe it's better for him to not play the first 5 or 6 minutes until we're needed. Maybe we need him down the stretch. So if you only have him for 22 minutes per trainer, and you might need him to close out a game, you're going to limit his minutes. There's a lot of things we don't know with Rob.
Yep. Other question we had was from Sally. Listening to the Hoosier Hysterics podcast for a while now, has anyone else noticed how differently former players feel they have been welcomed back in Indiana? Some say they talk to Archie all the time. Still listening to Matt Nover. He lives in Bloomington. Doesn't sound like he's getting the same feeling. Also wondering if you think today's kids even want to mess with the older guys. While Matt didn't play in the NBA, he did play in a Final Four. I think it would be exciting to talk with them about maybe the new kids are tired of hearing how it used to be. I don't know. I did listen to, I'm behind on a number of the Hoosier Hysterics podcast, but I did happen to listen to the Nover one today.
Yeah, I haven't listened to it yet.
I think some of the comments you talked about was he even suggested some kind of like mentoring program or something like that where older players can come back and be, whether it's matched up with a current player or something like that, to really instill. And I think a lot of what he talked about was some of the things with the effort and stuff like that, about what it actually means and what the standard is to play at IU. And it was a really interesting conversation. He seems like a interesting guy who still really follows the program a lot. It sounds like he's in Bloomington, so maybe that makes it a bit easier. But I think it would certainly be easy for a guy who hasn't played in a while, few coaching staffs removed, to be more disconnected than he certainly seems to be.
Guy's a movie star, man.
Well, there's also that. But so yeah, I don't know what to read into some of that, to be quite honest with you. I don't know that there are kids who don't want to hear that, because you see AJ Moya had an Instagram post today that was really calling out some of the guys and encouraging them for how they had played. And one of the first guys to respond was like Joey Brunk, who was saying, "I got you." And so I think he gets it. I think the right kind of guy wants to hear that message, and that would mean something to have exposure to those guys. What I can't speak to is the different responses that some guys have gotten as they've either offered themselves up or things like that. And then there's another part of me that's like, there's probably some inane NCAA rule that says you can't set up a mentoring program with guys like that.
I think once they're,
depending on what that looks like. So yeah, I don't know.
I think once they're in the program, you can communicate and deal with older players. The problem is recruits aren't allowed to talk to former players, which, by the way, happens all the time because they just run into each other at times. It's because if you got, like, let's say there's a star walking around, you're gonna want, like a Romeo Langford can't interact with a recruit. But like if Romeo Langford's on campus at IU working out and the recruit happens to come in, there's nothing you can do to change that, and so it's a weird open situation. But no, they are allowed to deal. I don't know if you can set up an official mentoring program, but they are allowed to talk to former players and have relationships with them. And I think that's a great idea, quite frankly. You'd have to pick the right former players because you want to make guys who are encouraging and open to it and things like that, and understand that, hey, by the way, your old coach isn't coaching now, so you got to like have a good relationship with the current coach. You know what I mean? Instead of just like, well, in my day, this is what we did. I think it's crap of what they're doing with you kids. It needs to be a good situation. It needs to be something that would foster growth as opposed to, throw a wrench in the works. But I think that's possible. I mean, look, I think there are recent players who, look, guys like Cody Zeller and Victor Oladipo are as in tune with IU as anybody, but they're busy. They're currently playing professionally, so they're not guys you can set up a mentoring program with. But guys like that with that attitude who are just 100% committed to IU, I think it's great to get them involved in the program, and I think there should be. And I know they do this, but make tickets available as possible to those guys. Have them in the locker room. Have them interacting with those kids. It creates more of a family atmosphere around IU, and it creates an atmosphere where I think that people want to buy into and people want to be close to. I talk about USC on here sometimes. That was the first thing when Pete Carroll took over as the USC head coach. People were angry because he was an unsuccessful NFL coach. It didn't make sense to have this prestigious football job go to a guy who was essentially their seventh choice. First thing he did was call up all those former great players and get them on campus and get them re-involved and recreate that sense of, we say USC is great because of all these players. We say Indiana is great because of everyone who's played there and all the championships and all the All-Americans and all of that stuff. So having those guys constantly back is a great reminder of the past and also of what you can achieve through this program. And so I think it's a great idea for a lot of reasons. And it feels like Archie has embraced that fully. And I have a feeling that coming up the way he did with his dad, it probably influences that decision a lot to sort of look at the past and how you got to where you got.
I think to me, the difference is really just, and this is probably a hard thing for a coach to figure out in terms of how much you want and how much people want, but it's like what level of involvement do the former players want? Like Nover is a guy who really seems to want to get involved and the kind of, use the word mentoring a number of times. And I think that's great. And I think guys like that can get, it would be easy and yeah, this is not a commentary on what they. Yeah, I know Saturday they've invited a bunch of former players back. It sounds like, and there's all the night rumors, which I'm not going to get into. But they want to get the former players back. But like, I think some guys could be put off by if it turns into like you're just parading guys in front of people to talk about the history. There's some people that like that level of, hey, this is great, I can come back. There's kind of a limited commitment, but there's other guys who want more than that and want to be acknowledged as more than that. And I think that's where it gets to be a difficult balancing act for the coach and the athletic department and all those kinds of things, is trying to figure out what you're comfortable with, what each person is comfortable with as you're trying to get people back in the fold. So I don't know if that leads to some of the perception that different guys have different access or received a different way or whatever, because it's, maybe there's a level that some of the staff just isn't comfortable with, depending upon what guys want to do. I don't mean they want to do anything illegal, but just like the closeness and whatever. I'm definitely not close enough to it to know, but I think there's a lot of different variations of what it can look like to have other guys around the program and involved and different things like that. So it's, I don't know, but
some of the problems got to be the number of people that could and want to be involved, right? You can't
how
have
do you cut
30
guys
players?
out, right?
You can't have 30 players coming in and mentoring, talking, because then it's just a time factor and all that. And then if you only have 5 or 10 or whatever, I do think there needs to be a consistent welcoming in Assembly Hall with tickets and a spot for those players to sit and be seen. And but occasionally. Having a speaker or something like that, but you can overdo that too, and then stuff falls on deaf ears, even from the coach. A motivational speech every game 31 times can wear on people. But I think I think that's just more difficult than it is. And some former players back in the day have been outspoken negatively about athletic directors and other things too. So you got to be careful about who infiltrates your program to some extent. You would hope that the former players would always have the best interest in mind, but sometimes that's not the case.
Yep, I would agree. All right. Well, I think that's all the questions that were in there. I think we knocked those out. So, so Saturday be Jared and Ryan for the Ohio State game, and hopefully positive things to talk about. At least I'll be able to watch. Last Saturday's game, I was coaching a basketball game, and I walked out of the game, and I think I had 90 texts from the sum total of the three of you about what was going on in the game. And so yeah, I had a lot of catching up to do to figure out what was going on. And then we turned it on in the car on the way back home, right in time to hear things just go like completely. They had started to go off the rails and then just completely off the rails for the remainder of our drive home. So
what was the final score of that? What was it?
It was much
16
closer
or 17.
It was much closer than the actual margin.
I stopped following
the
score once it got to a certain level. And I know they got some points at the end. And,
I think it ended up at 16. But
you got outscored in that game by 21 in 6 minutes, because it was an 8-point game at 10:04, and then bam, 30.
Well, they cut it down to
3.
It was 3 at one point early in the second half. Yeah.
Cut it to 3, and then it was something like for a stretch, it was like a 28-5 run or something like that, or 25-3 or something like that. It was just ridiculous.
Yeah. And apparently, because I hate myself, I did end up going back and watching the game for reasons I still don't quite understand. But
here's the thing. I was so not impressed by Maryland. I really wasn't.
No,
I
agree.
Especially the first half was just, how was Indiana? Indiana should have been a 15 in that first half. I mean, the way they played, they caught him. It was one of those things where sometimes, and we talk about those early starts, but sometimes those early starts are real bad for the home team because they're at home. They go out the night before, whatever it is. And there's a chance to jump up and catch teams on a bad day on those early starts. And they had a chance, and they just
that's what's, again, and we rehash this all over and over again, is that the good play. I mean, you're up 17 on Notre Dame. You're that much better than Notre Dame. How do they come back and take a 5-point lead?
Yeah.
You're better than Nebraska. You're 10 points with 7 minutes to go in the first half against Northwestern. It was a slow build to a lead. You finish that up 10, 12. You add to it in the second half, and you have an 18, 20-point victory over a team that's struggling. That's a nice win. wow, it just goes.
Yeah.
And it's so 16
Well,
to 11.
especially with the way basketball
Maryland
is.
is fantastic. They were guarding. They were getting open step-up threes, everything you would want Indiana to do until about the 7.5-minute mark of the first half, and then bam.
Well, especially with the way that basketball is played these days, with how many possessions there are and the tempo and three-point shooting things, no lead is safe. I mean, anymore. It really isn't. And you see in the NBA, I mean, there have been 2 teams that have come back from 30 points this year in the NBA. Like, and college is no different. I mean, yeah, you get up 30 in college, you're probably safe, but you can be up 20 and lose easily if there's 10 minutes left or 7 minutes left. I mean, you could easily lose that lead.
It's such a mental game these days because the talent has somewhat evened out. Even you have 5 stars at Duke and that, but you have systems and players that you got to be mentally sharp regardless of time and score.
Yeah, I agree. Yep. All right, boys.
All right, gents.
It's been fun. You guys
we'll
listen to
you.
Well, there's people still listening? Wow, that's amazing.
That's when I got in trouble the other night talking about chasing Mrs. Tonsoni. I was amazed.
I know.
Right.
There's 180 people 90 minutes into the show after a bad loss.
Yeah, we got to save you from yourself sometimes and just shut this down. What can we do?
Oof. Yeah, you just got to shut it down before Tonsoni gets off the rails.
Absolutely. All right,
and starts
cool.
asking about tiramisu.
Yeah, exactly. I put the S in assembly call. Just remember.
There you go, buddy.
There we go.
Someone's
got it, guys.
All right, take care. Peace.
All right, thanks, everybody. We'll talk to you guys later.